KSI left the Sidemen, and the backlash that followed was unlike anything that corner of the internet had seen in years. Within days of the announcement, old clips were resurfacing. His friends were releasing statements. His brother was being cited as a credible source against him. The BBC put it on the news. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, KSI was posting content for 7-year-olds and comparing himself to Beyonce. This is one of the most talked about situations in UK YouTube history. And the more you look at it, the worse it gets for him. Here is the basic sequence of events. KSI released a video announcing he was leaving the Sidemen. The problem was that at least some of the Sidemen found out when the rest of the internet did. During a charity match in the UK that several of them were participating in, a significant day for them personally and professionally, the announcement dropped. And his own friends learned about it from the public reaction. One of them said directly on camera that he had no idea the video was going out at that time. KSI later acknowledged in his own statement that the exit did not happen the way any of them wanted it to, which is a very careful way of confirming that he blindsided people who had spent years building something with him. KSI posted a statement after the announcement, and the tone of it was remarkable. He said he knew some people were grieving because of his decision, but that they knew it was coming for a while. He said some people might hate him, and some might be upset, and that was okay because he would always be there for them. He told people not to see it as an end, but as a new era. This is how someone talks to a fan base after a difficult announcement, not how someone talks to the friends they just blindsided on one of the bigger days of their shared career. The Sidemen then released their own response clarifying that JJ had released the news before they had agreed on a mutual way of letting their audiences know, and they said they would have loved the opportunity to give him a proper farewell. KSI replied to their statement with a love heart emoji, and then deleted it. And then the clips started coming out. Because whenever something like this happens, the internet goes back through the archive. And what people found painted a very specific picture of where KSI's head had been for a while. There was a clip of him comparing himself to Beyonce and Destiny's Child, framing himself as the one member of the Sidemen whose departure would define an era. There was a clip of him genuinely arguing that he was more famous than IShowSpeed. There was a clip of him on a podcast pulling out subscriber and view statistics to demonstrate that he was outperforming the Sidemen channel. And then another clip doing the same thing on a different podcast. And then another. These were not isolated moments from years ago. These were recent. And there were almost too many of them to fit into a single video. One of the more interesting things that came up in the discussion around KSI leaving was the idea that the Sidemen had actually been protecting him from himself for years. There was a specific story about KSI wanting to do an NFT project at the peak of the crypto era. He thought it was a great idea. And another member of the group spent significant time doing a detailed breakdown of every reason it was a bad idea and ultimately stopped it from happening. The point being that a group of people who genuinely care about you and will tell you when you are wrong is not a burden. It is one of the most valuable things you can have when you are operating at that level. And the concern expressed by multiple people watching this situation unfold was that outside that group, KSI was now surrounded by people who were not going to push back. People whose income depends on keeping him happy. And then a theory emerged that changed how some people were reading the entire situation. The suggestion was that KSI had deliberately blindsided the Sidemen not out of carelessness, but as a calculated content decision. The idea being that a messy public departure generates more attention than a clean and agreed-upon farewell. More drama means more clicks. More backlash means more views. He had done something similar before with a song where the backlash was essentially the entire marketing strategy. And then something came out that added a layer to all of this. It emerged that KSI had sent the video to his brother Deji before uploading it to the public, which meant the video was finished and ready to go before the Sidemen were informed. And the version he sent Deji was not color-graded while the version he uploaded was, which means he was still editing it while already sharing it selectively. Deji has been saying things about KSI's character for years. Most of it was dismissed at the time as brother drama, personal grievances blown up for content. But as people started looking back at what Deji had actually said, some of it landed differently in the context of what was now happening. He had described KSI as money-minded and thinking only of himself above all else. He had talked publicly about KSI's ego and the way it affected people around him. And the reason people were now taking Deji more seriously as a source was not just the content of what he said. It was something that happened separately. Footage surfaced of Deji saving an unconscious woman in a public setting. The kind of action that adds credibility to a person in a way that no statement or apology ever really can. What he did in that moment made people trust what he had been saying for years. And then someone found the old clips. Years ago, KSI had spoken publicly about YouTube and what he wanted from it. He said he had to keep up with a persona that was taxing on him and his general well-being. He said he did not believe it was about the you and YouTube anymore. He said he did not want to be part of the game of staying relevant at the cost of genuine enjoyment. He said he started making videos because that was what he wanted to do, and he wanted to end doing videos that he wanted to do. These were his words. And then you look at what he was making after leaving the Sidemen. Reaction content aimed at young children. Overstimulating short-form videos built around numbers and shock value. The content equivalent of what he had once specifically said he did not want to become. The whiplash between those two versions of the same person is one of the more genuinely depressing parts of this story. The content direction KSI moved toward after leaving had a very specific reference point. He was essentially attempting to build a Mr. Beast-style operation. Overstimulating thumbnails. Big number challenges. Short-form content optimized purely for reach rather than connection. The kind of content that performs extremely well with the youngest possible audience and extremely poorly with anyone who has been watching him since he was doing bedroom vlogs a decade ago. But even setting aside the question of whether this approach fits KSI specifically, there is a timing problem. Mr. Beast built that model when it was relatively new, when it felt original. KSI is attempting the same strategy at a point where a significant portion of the internet has become deeply fatigued by exactly that style of content. Arriving late to a trend that is already generating backlash is not a strategy. It is just being late. To understand what KSI walked away from, you have to understand what the Sidemen actually represented. 7 people who started making videos together as genuinely close friends and built something that became one of the most successful group content operations in YouTube history. The charity matches at Wembley Stadium. The travel videos. The Sunday League football. The group dynamic that produced content no individual member could have produced alone. And beyond the content itself, a social architecture that kept each of them accountable to something larger than their individual ambition. When one of them had a bad idea, the others could push back. When one of them was heading in a direction that felt wrong, there were people around him qualified to say so. That structure is genuinely rare at that level of fame. And KSI left it voluntarily. What made this situation unusual was how unified the reaction was. Normally, when something like this happens online, you get 2 clear camps. People defending the person and people attacking them. The discourse becomes polarized, and both sides talk past each other for weeks. That did not happen here. The reaction to KSI leaving the Sidemen the way he did and the content direction he moved toward afterward was about as unanimous as the internet ever gets on anything. Longtime fans were disappointed. Casual observers were confused. Even people with no particular attachment to either KSI or the Sidemen were weighing in with variations of the same observation. The BBC put it on the news, and the comment sections across every platform were telling the same story. This felt like a mistake. Here is where I land on all of this. KSI is one of the most talented and successful people to ever come out of UK YouTube. What he built with the Sidemen over more than a decade is genuinely remarkable, and the numbers back that up at every stage. But leaving the way he did, blindsiding people he had spent years building something with on a day that mattered to them, releasing a statement that read more like an address to a fan base than an apology to friends, and then moving toward a content direction that directly contradicts things he himself said he valued years ago. All of that is going to be very difficult to undo. The Sidemen kept him grounded. The Sidemen gave him honest feedback. The Sidemen stopped him from making decisions that would have damaged him. He walked away from all 3 of those things at the same time. And the early signs of what comes next are not encouraging.